Good evening, my dear students. This is our class on Philippine banking laws. This is chapter 1, no? Banks in business of banking. So, the declaration of the state with regards to banking recognizes the vital role of the banks to provide environment conducive to development of national economy. So as I said in the beginning, ato ang purpose sa mga bangko is to help the national economy, national development. So ang ilaha nga maka-provide sila mga financial services that will be useful to their own banking business. At the same time, makatabang sa pag-uswag sa ekonomiya. It also states that banks need high standards of integrity and performance. So, what are banks? Banks are entities that are engaged in the lending of funds obtained in the form of deposits. We have borrowing, lending, and safekeeping. Mga safekeeping ba, wherein banks are offering mga safety deposit boxes wherein the customers or the clients can place their personal properties there, safekeep there, nakay title, ibutang nimo dito, nakay mga alahas, pwede nimo na siya ibutang sa safety boxes. But you have to pay, of course, to the banks, no? And then, banks may also engage in other activities allowed by law other than lending. So, kanang mga bangko, dili lang po na sila for lending purposes. They can also have other businesses other than lending, provided that it will be approved by the Monetary Board of the Philippines. So, what are the nature, no? Sa may mga nature of banking business? First, may I underscore, we have the debtor-creditor relationship. No? Debtor-creditor relationship. So, unsa man ni? In this particular nature, it is a contract of loan and not deposit. So, kanang naong magbutang ta deposito ta sa bangko, o kwarta, kitang mga kliyente, it is a contract of loan and not deposit. Kaya may mga deposito ko dito, no? It's a contract of loan. In other words, ang bangko, siya mo'y nangutang nato. Mo nang mubayad siya og interest, no? Even how small, but the bank is paying interest to us, no, mga depositors. So that's why I said sa una that kanang naong mga deposits nga gibutang sa mga tao sa bangko can be considered as a liability instead of asset, no? Sa bangko, because they are actually borrowing that funds from the public, because they have to pay interest on that. So ilan ang gamiton pod para sa ilang operations, lending or non-lending activities to sustain their banking business. So that's the nature of a bank. Debtor-creditor relationship. That's the first. Second, fiduciary duty. So, last time in our discussions, katong nitungha sa atong mga klase, I always said that there must have a fiduciary relationship. So, what is a fiduciary duty? Fiduciary relationship means the bank's obligation, no, is to observe high standard of integrity and performance. So mo gina, no? This has been a jurisprudence, no, kaning siya, no, Philippine Banking Corporation versus Court of Appeals. I will not elaborate further on the details of the case, but definitely dapat dili mo remiss sa ilang functions ang mga bangko. Walay bangko nga moingon nga ma'am, baliki ra unya, ma'am, kay dili pa mi makahatag sa imuhon nga mo-withdraw ka sa imong deposit nga, ma'am, dili sa mi makahatag sa imong withdrawal karon, ma'am, kay wala pa mi kwarta. That's a no-no in the banking industry. So kinahanglan gud sila nga mo-provide, sa withdraw ka, di taga-adyo ka og kwarta. Mo loan ka, approve imong loan, dili na ka papaabuton because klaro na kayo nga naa sila'y pondo, well capitalized siya. Why? Because there must have a fiduciary relationship tali sa iyang mga kliyente. High standard of integrity and performance. That's why ang mga bangko na sila mga gisunod nga mga standards, no, gikan sa Bangko Sentral, being the regulatory agency. Okay? Third, it is not a trust agreement. It is not a trust agreement. And failure to pay a loan is not a breach of trust. It is not a trust agreement because banks do not accept deposits to enrich depositors but to earn for themselves. Kaya kung usbon, it is not a trust agreement. And failure to pay a loan, dili makabayad o loan, is not a breach of trust. It is not a trust agreement because banks do not accept deposits. Dili sa mudawat og mga deposito to enrich depositors, no? But to earn for themselves. Kay bisan pagpila imong deposits dira sa bangko, but you are only being paid 0.25% of your deposit. You have 2 million there. How much is 0.25%? No? It's not to enrich the depositors, but of course, for the banks to earn for themselves. So there's no trust there. Not a trust agreement. But should be fiduciary. The difference between fiduciary and trust. Fiduciary is to the highest degree of integrity and performance. But trust is another. It's just a form of, that's a separate discussion. But in this case, it is not a trust agreement. No? Ibutang na ko diya akong kwarta, no? Padya sa imuha. So, imuha na siya nga pangalagaan ng imo ang kwarta, no? Kay para madato ko, para matagaan ko nimo og dividendo, dili. Tani mo na imong kwarta dira at the prevailing rate of interest, pilay inyong risk 0.25% per annum, yung interest per annum, muna imong ihatag ra. So it's not kuan gyud nga makasalig yung ka dira na mo dako ang imuha, dato ka. Dili. Because very minimal sad ang mga interest sa mga bangko offered to the public. Fourth, indispensable institution. It is indispensable institution. Why? Because it has a vital role in economic life. Imagine ang area walay bangko. You will have a problem to have to access to credit, no? Access to money. Listen, much better good ang area nga nay bangko, and then an area with banks is a clear indicator that the local economy is going up. But if there are no banks or any alternative financial institution, there will really be a problem in that particular area. Or not really a problem perhaps, but the movement of the economy in that area is very slow. Significance of banking institution to commercial transactions. No? Importante kayo ang mga bangko to commercial transactions. Of course, because the flow of funds, you can access it to banks. And if banks will provide this can be utilized for doing business in the locality. Fifth, impressed with public interest. Okay? Has public interest because people depend on the honesty and efficiency of banks. Stability of banks largely depends on the confidence of the people in the honesty and efficiency of banks. So going back to that fiduciary duty of banks. So musunod diri ang number 5, which is being impressed with public interests. 6, degree of diligence. So diligence higher than that of a good father. So it is not an ordinary diligence that must be exercised by banks. Just like a good father of the family will exercise an ordinary form of diligence, ordinary diligence. But in the case of banks, it must exercise extraordinary diligence. In other words, extraordinary diligence. Dapat walay buling sa pagpakasayop. Okay? So, ang diferensya sa duha, if you study law, ordinary versus extraordinary diligence. So, simple lang. Pag musipyat ka sa ordinary, dili ganun ka bugat. Pero kung musipyat ka sa extraordinary, grabe ka bugat ang imuhang pagkasab sa gubangon. Okay? That's extraordinary diligence. There is a case here on the Cymex International versus Court of Appeals. The bank is under obligation to treat the accounts of its depositors with meticulous care and always have in mind the fiduciary nature of banks. Okay? Ang imong lang taon diri according to this jurisprudence, nga kinahanglan nga ang kwarta nga gibutang dira sa tao nimo sa bangko isip pautang diha nimo, imo na siya nga imo na siyang i-consider ang itawag natog meticulous care, ang paghatag og kanabang care sa maong kwarta, no? Always bear in mind that fiduciary nature of banks, highest degree of integrity and performance. Not enough that he exerted reasonable diligence to ascertain the safety of his clients. So kinahanglan gyud nga to the highest degree. Such diligence is only required in its fiduciary relationships with its depositors and not to other transactions such as sale of foreign exchange demand draft. So that's another story about sale of foreign exchange. So this pertains to foreign exchange. Okay? But on the usual deposits made by the people to the banks, such diligence is required because of the established fiduciary relationship. Now, looking and reading on Section 2 of the General Banking Law, which we have studied, prescribes the statutory diligence required from banks. Statutory, it means to say it is implied by provisions of statute, no? High standards of integrity and performance as indicated in Section 2 of the GBL in serving its depositors. Diligence required of banks is more than that of a good father. Phoebe Communication Bank versus Court of Appeals. And then, diligence extends to financial institution. In other words, due diligence must also be exercised by banks in extending its activities, its services to financial institutions like GSIS, SSS, Pag-ibig, and other financial institutions for that matter. 7. Treatment of accounts with meticulous care. Okay? Every person depositing money in the bank has his own deposit account. Treatment of accounts must be rendered with meticulous care. It must treat every account with utmost fidelity, regardless of amount. Fidelity. What do you mean by fidelity? No? Okay. Mura ba na siya og mag-asawa ba? That they must be fidel to each other. Okay? Relationship, fiduciary in nature. It should be mutual. Okay? Fidelity. Okay? So, must treat every account with utmost fidelity regardless of amount. Bisan pa og minimum maintaining balance na nga 500 or 1,000 versus 10 million, kinahanglan patas ang paglantaw ana sa bangko. Okay? Next, there is no law mandating banks to call up their clients whenever a significant amount shall be withdrawn from their account. So, walay balaod nga mandating sa mga bangko to call up their clients whenever a significant amount shall be withdrawn from their account. Pero, ang naitabo man ani, for example, you issue a check and then it is dako kayo nga amount, si 50,000, 100,000, motawag ang bangko nimo, but there's no law requiring banks to do that. So, there are cases, there are complaints nga ang mga tao murabag na yung mga kanabang mga inuntang mga dubious transactions. So, kinahanglan na malikayan sa mga bangko, mo nang mutawag na sila for confirmation and verification. Sir, ma'am, ikaw ba'y nag-issue ani nga cheque amounting to 100,000 in favor of Mr. X? So mutawag na sila to confirm. Okay? Or nakagisugo nga tao, pagpa-withdraw, mutawag na sila. Especially if it deals with high amount, no? Pero although treatment of accounts with meticulous care, wala pod ga require ang balaod ana nga yun anaon gud pamaagi. But banks are really doing the job as mandated for extraordinary diligence. Of course, the duty to keep records, no? Banks not expected to be infallible. However, they must bear the loss for not discovering mistakes if there are established procedures not followed. So, kung na mga sipyat, like for example, na ay mga issue kabahin sa mga unauthorized transactions, unauthorized withdrawals, usually banks will, basta mo file lang ka o kana bang complaint nila, no? Gitawag na natong dispute, no? Na ay mga sample, you have your account, tapos na nawala, wala nga amount niya sa bangko unya true to the lapse and procedures and practices of the bank. So ila na nga ni-file kag dispute nga baro nga nga owner sa bank book or bank account. So ila tong ibalik sa imo. It will be reimbursed back to you, no? Ilang i-deposito og balik siya sa imo. Pero kung ang transaction legitimate, kay usually mo gamit naman ron og mga usual cases ni, no? Gigamit ang imong account para sa pagpalit og mga Lazada, Grab, etc. Tapos mo send man na nimo siya og kana bang confirmation nga transaction nga ikaw ba ni, are we going to proceed? Mura og naana siya gi-text dira nga number, no? Mura siya og kanang code, no? Sa imuhon nga cellphone. Tapos imo pong i-input tong nga code dito. So that is already a consummated transaction. Why? Because enter na sa imong to proceed ang code, imo pong i-ano ang code, i-input sa tao nga nitawag nimo, kay usay ana mingon po silang taga bangko na sila. Tapos ma'am, mag-update lang mi sa imong account, ma'am. No. Tapos naay mo anha diha nimo nga code, ma'am, ihatag rag balik nako. So kato tawagan niya, hatag ko ang code niya. Modus na itong tawhan na to. Gapayla-ila ra siya nga taga bangko siya. Kay ikaw pod kay nahadlo ka, nagtuura ka nga taga bangko gyud siya. Imo pong gihatag ang code. Nagigamit na tong imong code. So mo na nahitabo, no? Ingon ana, that's consummated already. That's beyond the procedures and protocols of banks. So not reimbursable. Dili na mabalik tong kwarta. Wala na to. Thank you na to. No? So, careful ta. But in terms of banks, no? They must bear the loss for not discovering mistakes. Basta, basta loss, mistake nila, they will pay the loss. But if not, it's not. Dili siya liable. Dealing with registered lands. So, mga registered lands. So, what's the general rule? Mortgage can rely on title and thus not need to investigate further. So what are the exceptions? Mortgagee cannot close his eyes to facts, which should put a reasonable man on his guard and yet claim that he is in good faith. So with banking institutions, mere reliance on the title is not enough as they need to investigate also. So, dapat is the doctrine of the mortgagee in good faith. So, all persons dealing with property covered by the Torrent certificates of titles are not required to go beyond what appears on the face of the title. So, usually kani kung gamiton ang mga registered lands as collateral of loans. So, dapat extraordinary diligence yun ana ang buhaton sa mga bangko. Banks may exclude persons in their premises. They have that, that's the nature. They may exclude persons in their premises. And then, lastly, charging interest for loans, it is considered the very core of the banking's very existence. Thank you very much. That ends the first part of chapter 1. Please wait for further videos relating our course. Thank you.